And today we have Jayde Tripper from Temenos. Jayde, welcome and thank you for coming today. Do you just want to give us a sentence or two of who and what Temenos is and what your role is within Temenos?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks to Debbie and Karen and the team for giving me the opportunity. It's great to be here and great to see so many people on the call. Hopefully you'll come on camera or we'll talk in the chat later. So I'm the Chief People Officer. Temenos is a European fintech company. So we're about 7,500 people globally. I'm based in our UK headquarters, but we've got offices all over the world, a big population in India that build our product. And essentially, if you're not technical on the call like me, we build the software that enables banks to do stuff so that when you go on your mobile app and you apply for a loan or a mortgage or overdraft and it just sort of happens in a couple of clicks, there is a lot of technical processing and regulation that happens in the background. Essentially, that is what Temenos serves for big banks and small banks. One of the things that I love about Temenos in terms of our impact to society is that we do an awful lot of work in the emerging markets. So for serving the unbanked, if you think about populations in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and Latin America, we have a huge footprint in these areas because as soon as you can provide people and societies and communities access to financial products, being able to get a loan, buy a house, whatever it might be, you really are changing the lives and touching the lives of so many people. Because we're a DEI forum here, one of the stories that I love about Temenos is the work we do with, particularly in Kenya, with women-owned businesses that are, for the first time ever, being able to access credit capital to grow their organization. So it's so much more than a mobile banking application in terms of what we can provide to the millions of end users, notwithstanding what we do for HSBC and the big branded banks that you all know and use. So that's all about what we do. Super important work. We're a mid-sized company. We're 7,500 people. To some of you on the call, that might sound massive, but to others on the call, that's really small, depending on your point of frame of reference. I've been here 7 years. So I joined as a business partner, and then I went into talent acquisition, and then I've been in the Chief People Officer role for about a year and a bit. I think what's really helped me is that I've been an employee of this company, right? And I said I'm close. I pride myself in being very close to the people because I've been in their shoes as a regular person. I didn't come in at the exco. I didn't come in at the top of the house. So I think my lens and my narrative is quite different. I'm told quite refreshing to our senior leaders, and I think I can really help them. And it's definitely helped me on this topic around our wellbeing policies. So
super. Thank you. So Jayde, it is very easy to talk about culture, but so important to really think about the policies that underpin it. And I love what you have been building in terms of well-being policies. Why though? What started you on the journey to create a suite of policies? What were the problems you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so I don't know that it was a problem, like one problem that we were trying to solve, Debbie. We were coming out post-pandemic, and the company's 29 years old, right? We had a 29th birthday last year, and one of the founding slogans were "People are the key," right? I'm actually wearing my key at the moment. We wear these with pride, and it's always been about people are the key. And I think coming out, or during and coming out of the pandemic, we were being quite reflective around, we say this, we believe it, but are people really feeling this across the world in the new world that we now find ourselves in? The expectations and the needs of our employees were clearly changing. They were changing for everybody. And we were doing okay, but we wanted to raise the bar. And I think we started to look differently about what were the changing needs of our employees so they could do their very best work. And it was really about helping employees, but also helping our managers, who for the first time are just the expectations and the pressure and the demands, particularly of middle managers. Remember, most of our people report into a middle manager. Most of those people have never been a manager. And suddenly they're having this wave of, they're supposed to be counselors and therapists and all these things. And they really wanted to help. But were we giving them the tools and the processes and the frameworks to really be able to do the best by their people? And that was really our sort of starting point as to how we could really raise the bar, because being okay was not okay anymore for us.
Absolutely. And I think it's powerful, two things that you've said there, because I think more companies are waking up to realize that this looking after well-being and the flexible working and the family policies, etc., are no longer just an ideal perk. It's hygiene, isn't it? And amidst the great resignation, if you're going to be competitive, and I think this is powerful for companies, whatever your size, because you may not be able to compete in the very high salaries, but what you can compete is to building that culture and the policies that underpin it to match what's out there. Because a lot of what we're starting to do, you and I both know, it's becoming hygiene, isn't it? This is companies, companies that aren't offering that, people are wanting to know why. And the second thing I love that you're talking about, Jayde, is supporting the middle. Because we all know, some of us, don't we, that we have some great middle managers and some who are struggling. But what I like, too often in these discussions, I hear this middle manager bashing. Oh, well, it's fine. We got the buy-in and we've got the grassroots, but what are we going to do about middle managers? So instead of moaning about it, this is about leaning in, creating those structures to raise that floor, raise that basic offer and that support. So love that you're doing that. And I loved, a lot of companies have slogans, but I love trying to make sure that you're putting that into reality. But where did you start? All right. So how did you get on the journey? I mean, you had to probably talk at the senior level first. What did you do?
Yeah. So we started with the hygiene factors, right? So I started, I'll be honest, I started quite safe, right? I wanted to get some early wins, some quick wins, and we'll talk about the implications of some of that, I'm sure, later as well. So we started with what was called a benefit before and now is table stakes, right? If you're not offering it, and taking the leaders on a journey. So we really started with the parental leave, marriage and partnership leave, and family care leave, right? So those were the three things that we started with. A couple of things that we did. First, we benchmarked what other companies were doing, right? That were similar in our sector and similar in our size. However, and this is a big however, you have to do what's right for your company, because you can't just copy paste and say, well, this company is doing that, so we should do that, right? Because I think that frightens your leaders sometimes, right? So you have to really be close to understand the culture and the needs of your people, because the context, the business problem, all of it will be quite unique, and you've got to talk and be quite authentic in your offerings.
So did you use data to drive that? So I like that you do that benchmarking, what's happening out there, but if you're going to customize it to yours, how did you decide what your company needed?
Yeah, so we use data and market research. I think we would all agree that's always your starting point. I spend a lot of time talking to our employees, right, and sense checking them. Just whether that's employee. I mean, I travel all around the world, and I always have employee connect sessions and say, right, tell us what you want, what is happening. So I think you can look at your data. Talk to your employees, right? They'll tell you, right? Typically. If you're coming from a place of positive intent and not promising the world, so feeding that back, talking to your middle managers, what are people coming to them and asking them for? What do they need? And then from a leadership perspective, you have to pick off your leaders, right? Some of them will naturally go, love it, just do it. Others will go, really, do we need to? How much is it going to cost? We've all had those conversations, and I think that when you've got a whole leadership team, don't try and win them all over. not at the same time anyway, right? Because you'll never get started, and you have to get started. So I think it's knowing your stakeholders, knowing your people, and then going with some data was how we started. And then we took the feedback and tweaked them and went with them and used pilots as well is a big thing. What is it that you're trying to solve, and can you use a pilot group? I think one of the things that the leaders worry about, or at least my experience, was that if you bring in I take the example of menopause leave, right? And sometimes they'll go, oh, we don't want to talk about that, so just do it, Jayde. But I think there is a fear that as soon as you launch a wellbeing policy or program or leave arrangement, that half the company is going to suddenly disappear and what happened? Where did everybody go? They're all taking a recharge day, or they're all now on menopause leave. Where did everybody go? And the reality is, if you're coming from a trust of we're all adults, a trust and empowerment, so we trust people to do the right thing. You have to, else you'll get nowhere. And don't solve for the outliers that might abuse your policies. There is always a risk of that, but solve for the majority. And these things take time. People need to understand that this is real and you mean it. And it's not just you say that you have this policy, but actually when you start applying for it, there's so much red tape, or there's a policy behind the policy behind the policy, and actually it's just noise. These things, you need to avoid that. But these things, and we've seen that in the data around the usage of these things, it's gradually built over time. And I would say that was what worked best in our context.
Fantastic. Going back to your senior team, I like that you talked about picking them off, not going all of them. When you're winning them over, how did you use? I like that you also talked about there's your quantitative and your qualitative data. I remember you and I talked once. It was about being willing to really give some powerful stories, and perhaps even some scary ones.
Yeah. The power of telling stories, and I'm not a TED Talk storyteller, right? But I give you an example of that was super powerful for some of our leaders, because you could see the penny dropping around some of this stuff. We introduced pregnancy loss leave, so miscarriage, a very painful topic, whether you're close to it or you're not. It's very painful and emotional. And I was in one of our offices, and somebody came up to me and said, I love your policy around that. And I said, oh, thank you, it's great. And they said, almost with tears in their eyes, that happened to me last year. If I could have just applied for leave and taken a couple of weeks to put myself back together, my journey and my everything would have just changed. And said, I didn't know what to say to my manager. He wouldn't have known what to say to me. So I just came to work and carried on. And I said, and then I was nearly crying. I said, that shouldn't happen to anybody. And she said, I just love the fact that we're now taking these difficult conversations off the table. You don't have to say the words. You can just apply for the leave, and your manager, you're not asking for proof, of course, or anything like that. And when you start sharing, okay, clearly not names or anything, but when you say a story like that, or a little tale to anyone in your leadership team, they stop in their tracks. They go, I had no idea.
And that would be powerful also to share when you're trying to get your middle managers on board as well. The data is important to give a sense of safety, a sense of context, but it is that storytelling that helps bring people on in that respect. So, okay, let's, we've talked about, and people may have questions, and let me remind people as well, if you have questions that you want to throw in or things that you've used, do feel free to drop that into the chat. So Jayde, you got your exco bought in. You remind me again where you started. So you chose some policies that you knew were sort of hygiene out there, but felt simplest. And you started small to keep that safety, to be able to watch and see. So tell me again the ones that you did and how that played through.
So we started with parental leave. We started with marriage and civil partnership leave, and when we talk about parental, I'm including foster and adoptive children, the whole, whichever makeup of your family is, all of it was included. We took out some of these, sometimes we would uncover in countries that there were, you would be eligible after a certain amount of tenure. So we took all the tenure stuff off. We took all the, this is contractors, full-time, part-time, everybody. It's really about leveling the playing field. And family care leave, which encompasses anything around looking after elderly parents, sick family members, which has really become topical after the pandemic. I think a couple of years ago, this, at least, maybe my bad, this was not really on people's radars in the same way that it is now. But this idea of people are caregivers, they are not just parents, they are everything outside of work as well. And then we built from there. So I'll give you an example. And we took the feedback because we didn't get it right all the time. And we were I was trying to go fast. Maybe sometimes I was going too fast, but for example, with caregiver leave, we included parents, dependent children as independents, and partners. And we had one person that comes and said, but my uncle is like my father, right? And I need to care for him, and is that included? And then you think, God, of course it's included. Of course, please take the time. But we hadn't stipulated it, right? And I think that, so there were a few things that we went back and tweaked, and we told the people that we were changing it based on feedback. We introduced things like fertility treatment, and it wasn't clear that fertility leave and time off for fertility treatment, if anyone's been through that, is, again, physical, it's emotional, it's everything. But we hadn't made it clear that it was for men and women, right? So you read it and you go, oh, this sounds like it's for women, right? It's for, so we did tweak, and I think we were quite humble enough to say that, this is a continuous process of evolution.
And I think in doing that and gathering the data, did you have to roll back some? And did you have, because managers, I hear the fear that you would get from managers, well, this means everybody's going to take all the time off in the world. Did your data support that and reassure people? Were there things you had to tweak from that perspective?
I looked at the data actually yesterday again, and I look at it every month, but now we started this at the start of the year, so we're having some trends in the data, and it's gradually built. I think the fear around people, I don't want to say abusing the policy, but not using the benefits in the spirit that they are intended, can sometimes be a fear when you're kind of going into the unknown a little bit. And middle managers, they don't have enough people, the business is a difficult environment, and right? So I don't think it makes them bad that they're having these concerns. But when we look into the delinquents, if you like, I think I've had one instance, and we've had about 2,000 or so days of recharge days that have been used, which is our mental health. That's kind of your unplug.
And I'd love to come to that in a minute. Okay, so let's park that, because I really do like that as a concept. Yeah.
But I've had only one time where a manager has called me and said, I've had this person, and they're kind of asking for this, and I'm not sure, and should I approve? And I said, well, actually, I think that's telling you that something else is going on. That the question is not whether you should approve the leave because somebody needs extra recharge days or whatever. I think the question is what else is going on. So one of the learnings from it was the data will look, it enables managers to have those conversations. I'm saying the question you should ask is, whether you give it them or not is irrelevant, is what is going on and why do you need that? Lovely. And do you want to tell me more about that?
But what I love about what you're talking about, that's exactly what you were trying to do, is to empower and upskill your middle managers. So, what I'm hearing is, as you were implementing, you were looking at the data, you were getting feedback from the employees, but you're also getting the feedback with the middle managers. And that feedback is powerful, not just in tweaking the policy, but also upskilling your middle managers to start learning to ask those underlying questions, etc., to move beyond just systems thinking to the underpinning principles, etc. So as you expanded your different ones beyond those family ones, and I like the way you did that. And I would say, if anyone in listening to this is in a smaller company, Tech Talent Charter is a tiny organization. And when we were looking at things, no, I can't, we can't offer the big jet set salaries either, but we realized we could build these sorts of policies. The great thing about these well-being policies is that can be implemented in any company of any size, and really thinking in the round about people and people's experience is powerful. And I think it's powerful to remember, because when we first started, a lot of the early discussions around D&I were focusing on gender and what women needed. But it was interesting, whenever family policies came up, the women would nod openly and the men would come up to you quietly and say, I wish I had that too. And these policies are very, very powerful in showing everyone in an organization that they can benefit from an inclusive culture, and to bring people on the journey in that respect. So you began expanding into other ones, and it's one of the reasons I reached out to you in the first instance. I loved the idea of these recharge days. Can you talk me through that?
Before I do it, can I just make one comment on our equality around parental leave? We haven't nailed this yet, but one of the things that we did do, we had a phased return to work for men and women. Right.
Lovely.
And this blue. So if you were coming back, you could come back for the first, Dave, you might have to keep me honest here, but it was sort of the first month you could come back 3 days, and then the second month you could, so there was a phased return to work for mums and dads, right? Regardless of who was seen as the primary caregiver. And that was, people said, how did you get that done? I said, that was really easy. That was one of the most easiest conversations I've had. And the guys, people have come up to me and said, thank you so much. Just having that day to sleep a bit more with a newborn or whatever. and because you can go and give 52 weeks of paternity leave, right? Or make it, and often the data doesn't support that, people don't use it. So you need to give stuff that actually is going to be used. And while we have a bar to go on equality of parental leave, that phased return to work, they have used it, right? So
that's
bringing them in kind of that safe, maybe feels a little bit under the radar type of way, but they're using those days. And I've had a lot of, and that really surprised me, because it was a bit experimental, to be honest. And I think you have to be and see what works. But so that
Love
was
that.
kind
Love
of
that. Really, really positive. And again, if you go back to what you were saying, though, when you're trying to sell this into managers, you can give that person the phased return and then get a person who's wholly back, or you can drag these people back in, stressed, exhausted, and get somebody who is just a zombie sitting at their desk. It is, again, there's a reality about this, that everybody wins when you approach those things. But tell me about these recharge days, because I think it's a powerful way of unpacking for mental health.
So we'd not, just to give you an insight, I guess, into our culture, we're a tech company, we're a fintech, so we sort of sit in this intersection between tech and financial services. And I'll be honest, mental health and mental well-being was not something that we had spoken a lot about. I'll be honest, and we knew it was a thing, but we hadn't explored it and unpacked it. And the recharge days were, again, it wasn't solving a problem. We didn't have loads of absences. We weren't having lots and lots of people going off on burnout and stress leave. The data was not telling us that. But what we were seeing was this back-to-back calls, right? And that we'd got into the cycle of back to back to back and thinking, this is not productive, right? And this is not good for anybody at all. And so the idea of the recharge days was just to unplug and just take a day, no questions asked. You don't have to book in advance. Just say tomorrow, what, manager, I'm gonna check out for the day, right? And the manager will say, absolutely, no problem. So it's that sort of soft touch, slightly preventative. Of course, it's not solving the issue of mental health, and we have to be very honest about what it is and what it isn't, but it's giving people, if they are in the red, just that breathing space. So I'm just going to take a day and I'll come back stronger tomorrow. And again, enabling managers, the unintended consequences that managers seeing, okay, I can, encouraging them to spot these micro signs, right?
Yeah, no,
and then
absolutely.
recharge days. So if somebody's, the sort of conversations I have with managers, somebody's normally on video and they stop being on video, right? Somebody is normally, what are these micro signals that our managers could be tuned into, not because they're therapists, not because they're counselors, but because they care and they want to help. So the recharge days have proved phenomenally successful. Right.
And I think beyond even the classic ideas around mental health, we saw under lockdown a huge rise, and there were so many articles. And I've got to say, putting my own self in the room, I found myself suffering from chronic burnout at one stage. And I'm not somebody who's had mental health issues in the past. And to think back where there could have been, where we can create that culture that before people are hitting that stage, you can allow, as David said, a digital detox, and that there's no punitive, there's no questions asked, but that sense that people can do something for self-care rather than to hide it under the radar, rather than soldiering on, is really, really, really powerful. I mean, any questions? I'm happy to start throwing open to questions, but I think while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, Jayde, I like that you've gone into this from a sense of really, this is about experimentation, this is about learning, this is creating a sense of trust on both sides, that you're not trying to get everything perfect. If you were going to go back and do any of this again, was there anything that you'd do differently on any of the policies and how you began rolling those out?
Yeah, I would have looked a little bit differently at equal parental leave. We're still a little bit traditionalist around maternity and paternity, and even the language itself on reflection is probably not forward thinking enough, right? So it's how do you balance the what's your minimum viable product and how can you move and do something and test and learn from that, versus actually now we're kind of having to go back in the sorts of conversations. I'm like, we haven't gone far enough here, right? And how are we going to unpack that and go back and things like that. And actually some of our employees have come up with some great ideas as to what to do, because I've had conversations about it. So I think balancing going fast and having your MVP versus, okay, what are the consequences of this further down the line? And if you have a shot to do something, do it. Perhaps I could have been a bit bolder to begin with, would be one. The other one is the communication. I will still go into conversations with people, chance coffee, coffee moment discussions, and they won't know about this. So I think communicating through the managers as well, and not go to your HR employee hub or wherever and read the emails from Jayde. So I think communication as well, so that people believe that we are trying to move the needle and we're not.
And that they're real, isn't it? Because I've been in companies, one where, as you say, people don't know, and you hear from someone, what do you mean? I didn't know I could get that. But also I like the way you talked about encouraging the take up, because there's a lot of things where people talk about, right, there's no set number of holidays, but everybody knows don't take more than this many days and don't take the time off. Getting people to see that this is a real and genuine offer. So, and I love the idea of communicating, but going in with that mindset of, MVP, that minimum viable policy, and learn and evolve as you go on, is a powerful way to look at that. And that's very different than for companies. We see policies as something that's pristine and perfect and then rolled out and etc. But that different sort of mindset. So a super question from Freya. Which was the most well-received policy that you put out? Is there anything that you got a much bigger feedback of, oh God, that's amazing?
The recharge days, people loved. I think it's because it sort of signaled, my big mission when I took this role was really humanizing much more the organization. And I thought people saw that not as Jayde's thing, but as us humanizing, and this sort of a culture was very slightly changing for the better. So I got a lot of uptake as well. The other one, which kind of surprised me, was the menopause leave. Was super popular. I had a lot of very senior people come to me and say, you don't know how much of a gift this is. Admittedly, I'm younger, so I haven't been through that myself, so I can't speak.
It's coming, Jayde. It's coming. But no, absolutely.
But I also had so many guys come to us and say, if my wife's company did this, honestly. So, and that was quite unexpected. So those that I'd be the two, and like I said, and the phased return to work for new fathers was refreshing and was great, because I think it made it real. So I think those were the three that were most well received. It wasn't the maternity leave,
and we've got to. No, well, but I think the ways in which you talk about it now, it's asking what future well-being policies do you believe are on the radar? So what's coming up for you? And also on the call, I'd asked you, is anyone hearing things in other companies that's saying, oh my God, that's an amazing well-being policy? So Jayde, if you were looking at, on your horizon, are there policies that you're looking and trying to figure out how to implement?
Yeah, so one that's fresh out of the oven is our work from anywhere policy. Again, this is this covers a couple of angles, actually. One about flexibility and trust, and people having a whole world of things out there that they need to do. But there's also a quite a serious, because sometimes the business see this as soft stuff, and I said, no, this is real hard stuff. This is not soft stuff, right? But so we have we started with 2 weeks. We didn't go for 6 months. We didn't go completely remote, but we said, 2 weeks a year, you can work from anywhere if your job allows you. There are certain jobs that you physically can't, but so you can extend your leave, you can go and extend a business trip, you can work from another office or work, as long as you've got internet and your manager is cool with it, no problem. Because I think also from a career perspective, it's great. I mean, when I joined Temenos, I lived in Dubai, and I had 2 little kids at the time, and my manager let me work from the UK for the 6 weeks holiday because it's really hot in Dubai. And I said to Max, I said, that was worth more to me with little kids than any bonus or pay rise you could have given me at that time in my life. And the thing is, we were doing this anyway, but it just wasn't advertised, it wasn't formalized, and it's not too.
And this is it, isn't it? Yeah, it's what you're doing is quite often the great policies are capturing what great managers do anyway, and then making it for everyone, isn't it? Because really great managers know that and will look at their people and say, yeah, of course, Jayde, I trust you. Of course you work for 6 weeks from the UK. There's no question, but it's making that uniform for everyone else. I am hearing on the horizon, and it sounds like you're already betting it in, Jayde, the idea around miscarriage. If we talk about things that are never talked about, menopause was definitely one of those things, but also miscarriages. Miscarriages are devastating bereavements, but ones that for so many families, have to go unspoken of, have to go below the radar, and you just need to buck up and get on and work. Can you talk to me about that? And you've implemented that. Did I pick that up?
Yeah, so we've implemented miscarriage, pregnancy loss or pregnancy complications. So that could be, obviously at the start of the year, there was a lot of talk about abortion and all those things that managers shirk away from, right? And human beings do, because it's painful for them through personal experience, so they don't know what to say. So those ones was about being quite bold and, to be honest, shocking. We had to be quite shocking and say, you cannot have people who have had a miscarriage on a business trip and get up and go and talk at the conference next day. That's not okay. That's not the right thing to do, right? Would you want that if that was your daughter, your wife, your friend, your sister? Would that be okay, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as you start
Yeah.
being a bit bold and you know, the power of silence when you say that to somebody, you don't get, I would be surprised if you would get a lot of pushback around that, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
the question is, we need to do the right thing here, right?
And
Absolutely.
And I'm noticing from the chat, and it's interesting because even taking existing policies and enhancing them is another way of starting to do that. So the idea of, you were saying with the startup with your workforce tenure of less than a year, that pushing the boundaries on those things. And I think it is powerful. It goes back to what Jayde was talking about, trusting people. It's that sense of bringing the humanity to that. If there's anyone else on the call that either in your own company, you know, on other companies that are opening a thing, and someone was asking, we do, and we are beginning to gather those policies and to create some templates on that. We can share some of what we're doing in terms of building together and putting that out. But what I'd ask on the call, or anyone who listens to this, if you know of any company that is doing policies, is implementing policies that are breaking ground to deal with the reality of people's lives. I think, Jayde, the way you're looking at it is that sense of thinking of people in the round and thinking of the things that are painful to talk about, painful to discuss. Managers don't know what to say, and thinking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of being human, and trying to build those policies that take down the barriers that allow people to be human and bring their humanity to work and bring their whole selves are really, really powerful.
And I think it's also about,
go ahead, Jayde.
So I know I was, because somebody was asking what other policies we have on our radar. So the remote work is one. I think that's probably, I would love to have done that if I was 20 something, right? And said, right, I'm going to New York on holiday and I'm going to work from our office for 2 weeks. Amazing. And I'm stereotyping because everyone can do it, but it's also about being very cognizant of the nature of your workforce, because we are soon to be 4 generations in the workforce. So on the one hand, our grads want to travel the world and extend their business trips, and again, they're doing it anyway, Debbie, right? It's just, let's celebrate.
Yes, exactly.
Own it, right? And then similarly, one of the ones that I haven't got it through yet, but grandparent leave. Right, because we've also got people at the other end, nice. Right? And you know, in order, because these are societal problems, right? You know, everybody should be. It shouldn't be just for mums and dads. You know, how can you provide a range of offerings that speak to, you know, potentially your 4 generations of a workforce? Yeah. So I'm also trying to. I don't want the policies that we are bringing in to be unintentionally exclusive as well, that it's only for families of a certain generation, because you have other ends of the spectrum as well. So the grandparent one, I think if we can get that through, would be you know, I think it would be an acknowledgement of that as well.
Agreed. And we are talking about how do we increase the time and the age of our workforce. Yeah. And Becky, thank you. You know, I do agree with you. I think PwC has some super policies, and thank you for that link. And we'll pull in some of those to try and share across. And, you know, thank you to everyone here. Let's think about our takeaways. Jayde, if I'm listening in the call, and let's think whether I'm a tiny company, a mid-sized company, a big multinational, one of the things we try and do to frame it in terms of action.
Yeah.
If I were on the call, what could I do in 3 days? What could I do in 3 weeks? And what could I do in 3 months? Okay. If I wanted to move my company forward in terms of these well-being policies, what could I do in those increments? What could I do if in 3 days' time?
In 3 days, I'd say look at your data. Whatever data you've got available, it could be your attrition data, your engagement data, your market research data. Start with what your data is telling you, because it's not going to give you the answer, but it's going to make sure you're looking in the right direction, right? So I'd say, and your data is better than you think it is. right? Don't wait for the perfect data. It will point you in the right direction, and really try and have an outside in and an inside out view of what's going on. So I think in 3 days you can do that. Again, don't need to be a statistician, but look into your data would be.
And I like your data is both that anecdotal talking to people, building and talking to your managers, etc., and that external piece. And Becky, you mentioned that. I'm a huge fan of, as a tiny company, I pinch everything I can from big companies, tweaking it, as Jayde says. But, if I was a small company, I'd be listening to what Jayde does, and I'd be all over Becky's link in the chat on a website of what are the big companies doing that I could be thinking about and seeing how I tweak that for my current. Okay, so that's super. That's 3 days. So working days, that's what I could do by Monday. So what could I do in 3 weeks?
In 3 weeks, I would say to Becky's point, I'd say roll up your sleeves, right? This is some heavy lifting, particularly if you are starting out or you're a small to medium-sized company. So you've got to roll up your sleeves. This is not about nice PowerPoints, right? So you've got to get close to your leaders, close to your people, understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Don't make up problems to solve, to tick boxes, right? If you haven't got a problem, don't try and solve it. So stay quite focused if you're starting small. So spend time listening and use your network, like the Tech Town chat. Call people, ask them, what are you doing? If I can't do this, can I do this, right? If we're not big enough to do that, if we don't have budget for this, if I would never in a cat and house chats get this approved, what else, right? So I think keep asking what, if not, what else, right? Because you'll still get something. So I would say
I love that. Yeah.
Work my 3 week takeaway.
Good. All right. That would take me probably up to the Christmas break.
Yeah.
So at 3 months, what would I have got done?
So I would say then at the 3 month point, build your business case, and go with a pilot. So find a business unit, a region, a group of people that your data is pointing to. We have a problem, whether it's an attrition problem, a talent attraction problem, an engagement problem, whatever it might be, a sickness problem. Then use that as a pilot. Most of the time you'll get a pilot because you framed it in the safety of a pilot, right? And test and learn, and it'll enable you to go in Q1, as opposed to having it all bells and whistles and you wait till summer and the world changes again and we haven't done anything, right? You get a new boss, the leader changes, the business changes, you get bored, whatever it might be. So.
And I love your idea of thinking about it as a minimum viable policy. Yeah. So what can we do to start, and then we can iterate from there. All right, listen, Jayde, thank you so much for today's session, and thank you to those of you who are on the call. Thank you for the super comments that you've been offering and the questions. Thank you, Becky, for sharing the link. We'll make sure that we put that into the open playbook. I hope that you join us for another session and have a look at our past forum. There's a lot of topics that we'd love you to hear about, get your feedback on. And if you're sitting on the call and there is some topic that you think, really, I'd love to talk, and I've got something that I could tell the Tech Talent Charter about, this would be a chance to do it. Do reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Jayde, thank you so much, and well done to you and Temenos for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing all your learning today. Thank you for everyone for coming. That's all. Goodbye.
Thanks, Debbie, for the opportunity, and feel free to reach me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat, and I don't have all the answers, but we owe this to our profession and our people. So I think that together we're sort of making a movement. So happy to connect with anyone, anyone offline as well.